You know, if you think of Pittsburgh, PA, as a big, happy face smile, you kind of understand why when a lot of kids come to the Lake Superior Railroad Museum, they don't ask if this is our Thomas the Tank Engine. Well, as you can see, it is a tank engine. It's not Thomas. It's called the Minnetonka. And we're going to show you all of it. But first, I want to show you this. This is our museum guide. We published this. It's a thick book. It has every piece of equipment in the museum, fully illustrated with color photos and the history of each piece. So you've been seeing all these pieces over time. Now you can get this guide and look at them anytime you like. And every piece in the museum is detailed here in this guide. It only costs $15 plus $4 shipping and handling, and you can get it really easy by going to the Lake Superior Railroad Museum's website. That's lsrm.org. lsrm.org, and you can click on a place to buy this museum guide for $15 plus $4 shipping and handling. And again, like I say, it's got color photos. It tells not only the history of each piece in our collection, but it also tells you how we formed the collection and gives you a detailed history of our North Shore Scenic Railroad. Hopefully, when this is all over, you'll be able to come and tour the museum and ride our railroad. But with this information, you'll know as much as we do, and you'll have much more fun when you get here. So think about picking up a copy of our museum guide. In the meantime, this is the Minnetonka, a very important engine in the history of our area. 150 years ago, just outside of Duluth at Carleton, they pounded in the first spike of what would be the second transcontinental railway, the Northern Pacific. It started in Carleton, went all the way to the west coast, about 1,800 miles of track before it was all said and done, and they finished it in 1883. So it took quite a while to get it done. But this is what helped them build it. This was one of 4 tank engines that was built in July of 1870 just for the Northern Pacific. Each had a name, Minnetonka, which was typical of the time to name your locomotives, and they were think of them as pickup trucks. They were used to construct the railway. They were barged into Duluth, taken on the railroad tracks out to where Carleton is, and then started building straight west, hauling ties, hauling crews, hauling rail, helping to build the railroad, and there were 4 of them. This Minnetonka and one of the other engines was then shipped around all the way around to the west coast to start building in the opposite direction, so that they were building from the Pacific towards the Midwest and from the Midwest to the Pacific with the idea that they would meet. And this engine made it all the way across. It kept working for the railroad all the way until 1886. The Northern Pacific Railway was very well known. In fact, it was kind of the Delta Airlines of its day. In Northern Pacific, it was a name everybody could relate to because it told where the railroad went, and Northern, how it got there. Northern Pacific, very popular. Everybody knew the NPRR Railroad. Now, this particular engine helped build that particular railroad and helped make it a household word. It's very interesting, though. In 1886, Northern Pacific sold this to a logging company out in Washington State, in Olympia, as a matter of fact. And they used it for about 10 years and then sold it to the Paulson Brothers Logging Company in Hoquiam, Washington. And there it worked until 1928. That's a long time for an engine built in 1870 to still keep working. And they worked it literally right into the ground. And when they were done with it, there's a legend that it was left in the woods at the end of the line. There are many of these stories about logging companies that just leave steam locomotives out in the woods when they're done logging. This was one of the real ones that really did end at the end of the line. Let's go up in the cab. As I said, this was kind of like a pickup truck for the railroad in construction of the Northern Pacific. But if it was a pickup truck, it was a stripped down model. There's not a whole lot to work with here in the cab. You have your throttle, of course. You've got the forward or reverse. And how about this for a brake? You just lean on it. That's how you stop the thing. As far as the boiler goes, it was very low pressure because it was burning wood. Didn't have a coal burning furnace, but just a wood burner. So they put the wood in there, check the pressure, and here in the sight glasses, make sure that there was enough water on the boiler. Water for the boiler was obviously taken from the tank on top of the boiler. Now, the tank engine had many different advantages, and one of them was that that water was on top of the boiler, and the boiler was hot, so therefore in the winter, you didn't have to steam heat water that would be in a tender. You could instead just use the heat off the boiler to keep the water in the tank from freezing. And that was one of the advantages of it. The tank on this particular locomotive held 500 gallons of water, and the entire engine weighed just 12 tons. So by locomotive standards, it was kind of a lightweight. As I say, the Polson brothers used it right up until the late 20s, and then they just left it in the woods. Come 1933 was the 50th anniversary of the completion of the Northern Pacific Railway. And the guys in the front office decided they wanted to celebrate, and it was just so happens to have at the advantage of being the Chicago World's Fair in 1933 and 34. So they went to the Polson brothers and made them an offer they couldn't refuse. They swapped them another locomotive, sent this one back to the shops in St. Paul, rebuilt it, repainted it, put a new cab on it. It had been rearranged 100 different times over its very long, useful life. So they retroed it back to the original look as it was in 1870 and sent it off to the Chicago World's Fair, where it was a hit. So much so that they repeated that in 1939 at the New York World's Fair, and again later on at the Chicago Train Fair. All these were promotional and publicity stunts put on by the railroad. And it worked so well that they kept touring the locomotive all the way until 1975, when they finally said, you know, I think she's seen it and been everywhere, done everything. So they were looking for a home. Tom Lamphere was a member of the Lake Superior Railroad Museum Board of Directors and was a big mucky-muck with the BN at the time. And in 1975, he convinced them to spruce up the engine a little bit again, and it's been on loan to the Lake Superior Railroad Museum, the property of Burlington Northern Santa Fe, on a long-term lease. We take care of it, they own it, and you get to see it when we open. And we hope that's very soon. Think about getting our museum guide and having that at your disposal anytime you'd like. And then think about watching again tomorrow when we'll have another new episode of Live from the Museum. And in the meantime, do what you know you have to do. Wash your hands, cover your mouth when you cough, don't touch your face, keep a social distance if you would please, and always take care of each other.